guests. Welcome to The Beat. I'm Ari Melber, and let me tell you what's coming up. The Oscar-winning director of Titanic and Avatar, James Cameron, makes his Beat debut. That's coming up later, and it involves some serious and important issues in the news, including Iran, arms control, and what we can learn from history. So it is culture meets policy, if you will. Mr. Cameron coming up, and moments away from an icon in our field. Bob Woodward of the Washington Post and the famed author is here for a special discussion we are convening tonight about press freedom and big government censorship in this current era. So as I just mentioned to Nicole, that's just moments away. The context is the new heat that Donald Trump and the Republican Party are facing on several fronts. A president who has often been prized for his political loyalty, whatever you think about him, his detractors and allies have agreed that he has kept remarkable loyalty over the years. And yet now we see voters demanding answers, whether it is the fissure and cracks from the Epstein debacle to other things that just appear to not be acceptable, even Republicans speaking out. Here's one moment in a town hall in Nebraska with Republican Rep. Flood.
We believe in medical research. We believe in ag research. We believe in science research.
Why are you covering up the Epstein files?
You can hear the roar and the pushback. Meanwhile, there are reports about what Republicans are trying to do to rebalance something that has clearly spun out of control during a political season where going out in the constituent meetings, the town halls, the summer after passing a budget, they would like to be talking about policy or what they've gotten accomplished this year, not the secrecy around Epstein. Meanwhile, Trump's DOJ is doing things that some see as an effort to distract. Others say you have to take it seriously when it happens. The Attorney General looking for a redo of the Russia probe, which they already did. Remember, there was a bipartisan Senate review of these same issues. Trump's special counsel appointed in the first term found no evidence, let alone charges, against former officials on this score. There's also bipartisan backlash to Donald Trump's censorship, something I'm about to discuss with Mr. Woodward, because these jobs numbers came in. Trump didn't like them, so he shot the messenger, firing the labor statistics chief. Meanwhile, he's also going after public broadcasting and suing the media left and right. If people thought this was going to be a one-off with, say, ABC News, which had a lawsuit, or CBS with a merger, well, remember, Trump is now suing Rupert Murdoch's Wall Street Journal, the sister outlet to Fox News, and some people who used to, like on the Epstein case, give Trump a pass are now wondering how far this will go. There's the threats against universities, and our next guest knows all about dealing with this kind of government, a government that sometimes will go to great lengths to try to suppress the truth. Indeed, both in the Nixon era, where Bob Woodward, of course, was a big part of exposing Watergate, to his recent book and reporting on Trump, he has clashed with this very litigious president. That was all stemming from the tapes for Woodward's reporting, including the bestseller Rage. And now we are joined by legendary journalist and reporter Bob Woodward, who broke the Watergate scandal with his teammate Carl Bernstein, which ultimately, along with other factors, did lead to President Nixon's resignation. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner and remains an associate editor of the Washington Post. He's authored over 20 books, including really remarkable pieces of reporting about every recent president. Bob, it's great to have you back on the program tonight. Welcome back.
Thank you.
When you look at this government, this second-term Trump administration's approach to the press, what do you see, and what do you think of recent departures at your publication, the Washington Post, by journalists?
Okay, well, let's start with Trump. What I did, and this is not an archaeological dig into something that was said months ago, but last month on Truth Social, Trump said, people don't explain to me, I explain to them. And you see in his tweets and what he says publicly, these bursts of ego that he is in charge, he's controlling everything. And as I've watched this and listened to it, I did 3 books on Trump. It's pathetic that you have
Hmm.
the president of the United States out there just pounding away and saying, oh, look, we have got to do it my way and only my way. And there is, um, and I stress the word pathetic. Why is the president of the United States feeling so out of it or disabled that he has to say things like that? Makes no sense. It's and this, of course, is a common characteristic of Trump. He doesn't know what's in his own interest. If you had a friend who was talking in public and saying things like, Trump says, people don't explain to me, I explain to them, you would sit the friend down and say, let's tone it down.
Yeah. And that's striking coming from you. When you look at the Washington Post, where papers are going to make their own decisions, and owners, of course, can make changes. We all understand how that works. We've all worked inside news organizations. Do you have any concern or anything you want to share about the number of reporters who have exited? And of course, Jeff Bezos and the ownership have changed some things. The opinion section, they've said they've narrowed. There are reports here, and I'll read from the New Republic. This has been disputed to some degree because I want to include that Bezos has disputed aspects of this, but there is reporting um, here referring to a previous legacy where there was almost no intervention in journalism to one who, quote, blocked an endorsement of Harris and revamped the opinion section in what they call a pro-Trump direction. Bezos has said more focused on personal liberties.
Well, there are a lot of great reporters and great editors there. I obviously read. I'm still affiliated with the Post. Uh, I think sometimes there are lapses. The editors know this. They're working on it. I think Matt Murray, who is the executive editor, is really working full time to make things better. At the same time, as a reader, there is a lot of great journalism in
Mhm.
the Washington Post.
Let me ask you about the FCC. You mentioned Donald Trump's attacks. This is a kind of a sleepy agency that few people think about day to day. And I think that's how it's supposed to be. But the current FCC chief, Carr, has said publicly that he sees the role of that government commission as reshaping the media and investigating different news outlets, and that he wants coverage, editorial, to be different. Um, do you think that is concerning and an attack on the First Amendment, given your experience?
Well, it certainly is not going to work. Something like that uh, is not happening. Obviously, there are efforts by people in government, Trump himself, people who work for him, who are trying to shape and denounce the media. Uh, that's quite frankly not necessarily that unusual. And
Mhm.
again, everything has to be measured by the product. And the product is still excellent in many ways. But as I say, the executive editor, Matt Murray, knows he has a lot of work to do, and they have a long-term strategy. I know Matt Murray, and I have faith in him that he'll be able to do this. It's not going to happen overnight.
Mhm. When you look at the way the Jeffrey Epstein case has metastasized into something larger, you've studied many presidencies, and you've told us before that you have to follow the evidence as you go and not have too many preconceptions about which thing may matter or last. This clearly matters to a lot of people in our democracy and has bedeviled Trump more than some other scandals because of the secrecy, perhaps because of the open questions. How do you make sense of this? Does this matter? Does there need to be more government transparency in that case?
Well, transparency is always a good thing. I mean, Epstein died a long time ago. There are lots of allegations of things he did years ago, particularly with many young girls and so forth. You know, when I get up in the morning and I look around, what am I going to work on? You will ask yourself the question, or I try to ask this question, what's the path to getting reliable firsthand information? It probably nothing's more difficult than something that is 6 years old,
Hmm.
that is controversial, and I think there are matters of economic policy and foreign affairs policy that are much more important. I frankly think in the end people understand that and get it. I try to take the serious track as much as possible.
Yeah, understood. And again, there are some people who think this could be the biggest thing ever, but that's partly because they've been imagining or brainstorming theories beyond what evidence we have about what it is. And yet the secrecy by the government hasn't quieted that. Bob, I want to fit in our shortest break, 90 seconds, and then continue with you. We'll be back with Bob Woodward
Thank you.
in a moment.
Carl Bernstein and I were able to break into it, had the full support of the Washington Post.
Yeah.
Information and kind of accountability in government is essential to democracy. The Washington Post just vibrated. There will always be a band of brothers, a band of sisters, a group of people who gather and broadcast or publish what they believe the truth to be.
Bob Woodward over the years. You remember that guy?
How long ago was that?
Let's see. I got the notes. We got 09, 2023, and a little 2025.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Go ahead.
no, I mean, the answer is, I said, there's work going on. There's, again, to repeat myself, look at the product. There are a lot of good stories in the Washington Post. Some reporters, some distinguished, big name, very successful reporters have left. There are a lot of young people there, and so I'm optimistic about this. And as I say, the editor has a plan.
Yeah. And it's striking and I'm sure meaningful to a lot of people that that's where you're at, which sounds like a real vote of confidence. And as you said, let the work lead. I also wanted to hear from you, Bob. I joked about Woodward Holiday because I only get to talk to you every so often, a couple times a year. And so I haven't caught up with you about the way that this Trump administration is trying to use government power and executive orders to target opponents. In the old days, that would be something we would have to prove, and the government might deny it. Here, as you know, the president has announced in some cases that he wants to go after law firms because they exercise their legal rights on behalf of clients that he simply disagrees with or opposes. In the business space, the free market, he has also done that. What is your view of that? And do you think that our civil society is up to the challenge? Not in a partisan way of being out against any particular politician, but in a civic way of saying, well, no, law firms should not take their orders from the government. Indeed, they have to litigate against the government sometimes.
Well, there's always this tension. I mean, one of the things I asked Trump, I've done 3 books on Trump's, I said, what's the job of the president? And he said, the job of the president is to take care of the people. I think that's really a great answer. I wish energy would go to taking care of the people and not a lot of this nonsense. It's too bad. It doesn't serve anyone, and somebody needs to kind of shake it out and say, let's find our common sense. And again, how do you take care of the people doing some of these shenanigans and very aggressive actions toward journalists, toward the free press, toward law firms, you name it. Quite frankly, and I'll say it again, it's pathetic. It is a misdirection for the presidency. And getting to know Trump and doing all of this work on him, he just doesn't know what's in his own interests so often, and he does not understand the consequence of this. And I wonder, is there anyone in his circle who can put the brakes on and say, why are we spending our time on this? I've not seen evidence of that. And it's too bad. It's not one thing I learned about Trump, not understanding consequence. I don't think he wants to hurt all kinds of people. I don't think he has this Nixonian venom, if you will. But sometimes it looks like that's the outcome. He's got to get control of that. He's got an immense responsibility. Having worked on 10 presidents, the concentration of power in the presidency is increased over the last 50 years, and Trump has it. Let's hope there's a righting of the ship.
Sure, we can definitely hope. And you mentioned the consolidation. Congress used to operate as a co-equal branch. You've reported, as others have, about folks walking up to Nixon there and talking about what the Congress believed. We haven't seen yet that kind of oversight, at least across party lines, in this era, even with all the concerns raised tonight. Bob Woodward, I appreciate you making the time. I hope to have you back in the fall and get you when you have time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. When we come back, the pressure over the Epstein uproar is making these town halls harder on Republicans.
Why are you covering up the Epstein files?
And the Texas clash, where Republicans admit if they don't change the rules, they will lose seats. That's what Trump all but admitted. And we look at that attack on democracy, plus James Cameron with a warning about what we can learn from history and the nuclear arms race. His Beat debut is coming up. Today marks the 80th anniversary of the first nuclear bomb, the U.S. dropping that bomb on Hiroshima, Japan, and then another in Nagasaki, killing hundreds of thousands, many more also afflicted by the ensuing radiation and illness. President Truman announced that unprecedented use of the new weapons that did help end World War II. The sheer devastation and ensuing risk would later drive really decades of international work to contain those very weapons that the U.S. innovated. We have now modern arms control, nuclear nonproliferation treaties like this being signed here, and today's ongoing efforts by countries like the U.S. to stop other nations from going nuclear, including Iran. Now, Charles Pellegrino's new book, Ghosts of Hiroshima, covers those first bombings with accounts from survivors. At moment zero, he writes, the most important thing in the world for 8-year-old Takashi Tenemori was a game of hide and seek. In an instant, his classroom, quote, vanished in the purest white he'd ever seen. Beneath the blinding light, his friends appeared to have been spirited away. Now, this new book is out today, and it forms the upcoming project by the legendary filmmaker, James Cameron. It is his first film outside the Avatar universe in over 2 decades. As part of our Summit series, where we speak with people at the summits of their field, James Cameron joins us now. The filmmaker, of course, has shaped modern Hollywood, Terminator, Aliens, of course, Titanic, and the ongoing Avatar franchise. He has earned some of Hollywood's most prestigious accolades, 3 Academy Awards, 4 Golden Globes, 2 Emmys, and much more. Thank you for joining me today.
Look, it's my honor, and this is such an important subject, so I'm honored to get to talk to you about it.
Well, let's start there. You have said that you want to approach this without any politics or foreign policy debates, but telling the story of this level of devastation brings with it some warning, some idea that we might apply today. Tell us about telling these true accounts and what you hope to bring to the story.
Oh, I think absolutely it is a warning. I mean, I think that collectively, at the end of the Cold War, when the Soviet Union collapsed, I think we all sort of took a big sigh of relief that that whole Cold War thing was over. But of course, it's not. There are still 12,000 nuclear warheads. Most of them on alert in the world today. And the thing that's really, I think, the most sobering is that they are in a class of weapon that puts out 100 to 200 times the yield of what happened at Hiroshima. So you have to scale it up in your imagination. My goal with making a film from this book, the book itself is excellent, and people should absolutely read it immediately. And not wait around for my movie. But my goal as a filmmaker would be to make it real for people, as if they were on the ground, as if they were experiencing it. And it'll be through the eyes of these survivors, this testimony that Charles Pellegrino has accumulated. And I think people need to face it directly. They need to look it in the eye. And what better occasion than the 80th anniversary of this tragic event, and what can we learn from it? I want to stay away from the politics of it, because people will politicize it for themselves, no matter what I say and what level of neutrality I try to bring to it.
We all know the cliche of ignoring history and potentially repeating it. You're bringing this important book and your vantage point. I mean, you are someone who is one of the great storytellers of our time. And so if we learn the story right, you're welcome. Far be it from me to say, others have said it, but if we learn the story right, and you're rooting it in what happened on the ground and what happened to these people, and something that I think it's fair to say has come across in your other works, which is the humanizing of other people, even when we're told that we're so different. Then what might we get from it? What might we learn as opposed to ignoring in our history here?
I'm not trained on policy, and I don't know what the policy solutions will be, but I don't think they'll take place without us kind of en masse, the populace of the world, really kind of rising up and making our leaders responsible to this. I think it's absolutely critical for people to sort of break out of our torpor a little bit. There's a lot of things to worry about right now, but this is one that's never gone away. And I think you could even argue that we're in a more perilous state than we've ever been. We have, authoritarian leaders around the world. It always boils down to a few people in a critical, very, very tight decision window. From the launch on warning, initial warning of an ICBM launch, you have about 22 minutes to decide whether to retaliate and in what way you want to retaliate. There's no real defense against these weapons. Let's pray we never get into that decision window in the first place. We have to reduce these weapons. Eventually, we have to eliminate them. I can't tell you exactly how that can be done. There are a lot of people working on this problem, some very smart people working on this problem, but I don't think it's going to happen unless we all collectively demand it. And that's where I think culture comes in. That's where I think books, films, and so on, and us being an informed, populace will make a big difference.
Oppenheimer proved to be a big audience and critical hit, while focusing more on the American march towards the science and the technology of the bomb, not this other side of the story you're telling. And so I want to show you a little bit of what Christopher Nolan said about the vantage point of that film when we spoke with him. Take a look.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm trying to really be mindful of the point of view of the audience. Where are we putting the audience? In the case of Oppenheimer, we're putting the audience into his head. He was never on the battlefield. And there's something chilling about that. He heard about the bombing of Hiroshima on the radio with the rest of America. I found there to be something more powerful about living in his world, his view of it, that I found through its remoteness somewhat more chilling.
What do you think of his view that that's a more powerful way to tell the story? And why is it important to you to look at the people on the ground, the devastation in Japan?
I think Chris chose to tell a different story. He and I haven't talked about this, but I'd like to, Chris, if you're watching, give me a call. I'd like to talk to him about it. I think his decision was to not show the actual event in Hiroshima, but to tell it through Oppenheimer's view. And in a way, a lot of these scientists had kind of blinders on. It did surprise them after the fact. Even though they intellectually knew what the weapon would do, that's why they were there. That's why they were building it. I think that the emotional aspect of it caught up with them later. And what that film does show is the emotional impact, his guilt after the fact. I don't mean it as a criticism of the film at all. I want to be clear about that. But I found it personally unsatisfying because I think that we collectively have sort of forgotten, if we ever really knew, what these weapons really do, how horrific it really is. I mean, I think what is needed is a kind of Schindler's List. I also look at the first 22 minutes of Saving Private Ryan, where Spielberg cast an eye on the landing at Normandy, and at Omaha Beach, and showed us how horrific that really was. In a sense, it's not only heroic and patriotic, but it's also an indictment of war. How do we keep ourselves out of these situations when you're dealing with nuclear weapons? These are weapons of mass destruction. They are used against civilian populations. They do not discriminate between warfighters and civilians, men, women, and children. This has to be taken into consideration. I just think we need to look at all this again, especially when you've got saber rattling going on right now between Trump and Putin, both of whom seem to take a stance that it's like, don't try to be crazier than me. I can out crazy you any day. It's like, that's not helpful, because we've come very close over the last, 80 years, a number of times where we've had human error in the loop, in the chain of command that has almost precipitated nuclear conflict. If you add a heightened level of escalation and heightened tension to that, it's really a recipe for disaster.
Is there some observation you have about why it seems that we have all these cultural differences, but as you just alluded, very different societies in Russia and America, or very different other societies, seem to go towards glorifying escalation and war rather than other more peaceful alternatives? Any thoughts there?
Oh, well, look, in entertainment media, we want conflict, we want violence, we want people shooting at each other. That makes for a much better story. But in real life, especially if you're a parent and you have children, or you're a grandparent and you have grandchildren, you want exactly the opposite. You want them to be safe, and you want us collectively to be safe. And we're not safe right now. I think this problem dwarfs anything else that we potentially face.
James Cameron, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real treat for us.
It's been good. I really enjoyed it. Thanks, Ari.
Our thanks to James Cameron. We have this redistricting clash coming up, and the heat on Trump and Epstein. Emily Bazelon next. Can you get to the bottom of a government conspiracy if you are in the government? What if you're part of the conspiracy? What if exposing it in any way will hurt you holding power? These are the questions that go back through the dawn of any government conspiracy, whether you talk about the Warren Commission and JFK's assassination, questions about whether the CIA was ever involved, even indirectly, in arms dealing and drug dealing and all these other things. Well, the Epstein case, which you've certainly heard about, has some of those same questions because Donald Trump has a history in the case. He knows the deceased individual Epstein. He claims to have distanced himself from Epstein, but that itself has been contested. And it was Donald Trump's Justice Department that oversaw the prison cell where Mr. Epstein mysteriously died and the secrecy surrounding that. Politically, you've got Republicans in the House who, of course, are yoked to Donald Trump and now trying to say to their voters, hey, we want to get to the bottom of this too, while not trying to endanger themselves and Trump. I say that as introduction to a story that sounds bigger than it is. Because today, after quite a delay, House Republican leaders say they actually want to subpoena the individuals you see on your screen, but they certainly delayed issuing any subpoenas. They announced this a while back and now finally signed it. And what you see looks like a smorgasbord of spreading blame around the Clintons, former attorneys general, Robert Mueller, why is he in there? No one knows. Barr, who actually was attorney general, overseeing the DOJ and the Bureau of Prisons when Epstein died and when, of course, those videos disappeared. The committee also says they'll subpoena the DOJ for the documents, which Donald Trump and his allies and Pam Bondi claimed they would release and never did. On the DOJ side, they're discussing whether to release audio from their unusual interview with the Epstein conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell. One of the oddities, and victims' families say hypocrisies, of this entire Republican obsession is that so far the main thing that's happened within the Justice Department is leniency for Maxwell going to an easier prison. So Republicans are trying to use the subpoenas to feed headlines that they might want to get to the bottom of this, but they delayed signing them, and they have subpoenaed individuals like Mueller that kind of make a mockery of the whole thing. Now, here is how it's playing out in red states.
Why are you covering up the Epstein files?
We're joined by New York Times Magazine writer Emily Bazelon. Welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me.
I mentioned first the suspicious timing. I mean, there's so much here, but we know how it works. So sometimes our job is to make sure we tell viewers why we're seeing headlines. If you go on the internet right now, you see Republicans subpoena all these people. But why did it take so long for Comer, for example, to even sign these subpoenas?
I mean, one can imagine that he was hoping, and Republicans are hoping, that the story was going to die, right? Because Trump wants to put it to rest, has made that very clear. He's very impatient with his supporters who are insisting that they want more information. And it hasn't died. Republicans keep hearing about it from their constituents, and they made a decision that, as a result, they had to respond in some way. I think that list that you put on the screen shows that they are trying to put as much of the blame of this as possible on former Democratic officials. There are only 2 Republicans, or maybe sort of ish 3 if you count Bob Mueller, on that screen. And, you know, why subpoena former President Bill Clinton and not people who were more directly involved in the last Trump administration, other than Barr and Sessions, the attorneys general from the first Trump administration?
Right. The list is incredibly unserious and untargeted, which makes it look like, to the very end, even after all this, a lot of Republicans see this as content farming, political content, rather than dealing with the real questions. There are questions surrounding his suspicious death and the secrecy. There's questions around his original sweetheart deal, which Survivor and women's advocates have talked about on this program and others for a long time. I want to go back, if we cared about the substance, to the prosecutor, Alex Acosta, who's not subpoenaed, but cut the original sweetheart deal that was so controversial. This was back in 2008. I'm reading from Axios. He reached what they call this non-prosecution agreement. So Epstein had basically fake time. And it ended what was a federal probe that could have stretched farther, we know, because later it did. If you cared about getting to the bottom of not only this, but you say, okay, the guy's dead, but other people who might be getting away with things, if you're concerned about sex trafficking and the mistreatment of women and girls, isn't this someone you'd want to talk to?
Yeah, for sure. I think you would want to talk to Alex Acosta, who was the federal prosecutor right in the middle of this. And you might want to talk to other people in the Justice Department who had some kind of oversight over those decisions at the time, instead of Hillary Clinton, for example.
Yeah. As for Trump's relationship with Epstein, this was a person who was, as the subpoenas reference, a high-flying individual. So the fact that he consorted in business or even socially with various people is not evidence of a crime. We have a much higher rigorous standard. But Trump has tried to tell this story that has got himself tied up in knots where, oh, maybe he knew enough or had enough of a falling out. Maybe he didn't know the really bad stuff, but he knew some bad stuff, so he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. That's the story. Well, new headline from the Daily Beast: Epstein was still a member of Trump's Mar-a-Lago long after indictment. The revelation Epstein was allegedly still a member of the club 7 years after they used this term poached. You could use different terms, hired away or kidnapped, right? sex trafficked this victim from the spa at Mar-a-Lago in 2000. They say raises questions over Trump's, quote, version of events. It's a 7-year gap. Do things like this, again, without presupposing anyone's guilt, but do things like this add evidence to why Trump might be so secretive about all these files?
I mean, sure, because the timing suggests that actually his relationship or some involvement of Epstein lasted longer into the time period covered by the indictment of Epstein, right? I mean, that's a crucial part of this picture. And who knows what exactly was going on. But also, this whole idea that someone, quote, stole a person who was working as a masseuse at Mar-a-Lago, that she was a victim or could have been a victim of some of Epstein's sex crimes, that's also super fishy and makes you wonder what exactly the folks at Mar-a-Lago knew about what was happening. Just that word stole is such a strange word to use in this context. And yet that was what Trump said.
So if he knew more then, what does that actually do? Not just legally, where we've all been reminded presidents aren't prosecuted in office no matter what you find, but what does it mean in the wider spectrum where life is unpredictable? That's why reading the news can be interesting, because you actually find, gosh, who knew that would have been the thing? But here we are in August after a lot of Trump scandals and problems, self-dealing, crypto, abuse of power, cutting 9 million people off health care. But this seems to be the thing that is dragging him down more than anything else this term.
Because it matters a lot to some of his supporters, right? In their narrative, there's this conspiracy involving the most powerful global elites. And Donald Trump was supposed to be the hero who saved the American people from these lies and corruption. If it turns out that he is instead really implicated in the story, then that's a different set of facts. In a sense, it's strange that there is so much resistance to the idea that he's implicated, because whether or not there was criminal activity, we've had these pictures of him with Epstein, this knowledge of them knowing each other socially quite well for a long time. So the idea that he's completely unsullied by all of this is like hard to understand how that was part of his supporters' view. And yet they really did present him as the person who was supposed to solve the whole puzzle. And now I think it's harder to keep going with that version of events, though they seem really determined to blame other people like Attorney General Pam Bondi for what's happening rather than laying it at Trump's feet himself.
And politically, there's a blueprint and a muscle memory for that. Right, which is what's so striking. It has often worked on that side to say, remember Obama, remember Biden, hey, Hunter Biden, laptop. You know, it's almost like its own language. But you're saying that here, the ultimate discovery that they thought they had Luke Skywalker at the head of their team, and it's actually Darth Vader, what could change the trajectory of the second term?
I mean, maybe. You certainly could imagine it shaking the faith of some of Trump's own supporters. And that's why I find this leniency for Ghislaine Maxwell puzzling. I mean, I guess if she exonerates Trump so much or gives them something else they think is useful, that is meaningful. But who is going to believe that if there's a quid pro quo, if she gets pardoned or some kind of better treatment in prison, which is already happening because she's now in minimum security when she wasn't before? All of that set of questions surrounding how the Trump administration is dealing with her, I find quite puzzling if the whole idea is to show how seriously they took this sexual abuse and how bent they are on punishing people for it.
Yes, and that's why so much of it goes back to political content, because there's a real world here separate from all of the entertainment. And if in the real world, the sum result of this multi-year movement is to rally around a president who is rewarding the only living incarcerated Epstein conspirator, right, then that could make a cynic cry.
She's convicted of serious crimes.
Yeah. Emily Bazelon, good to see you again, even on these serious topics. Thank you so much. Coming up, the FBI being asked to hunt down these Democrats who say Republicans are trying to steal the vote. Next.
This reminds me of when Donald Trump called the Secretary of State of Georgia, and he felt he was entitled to 11,000 more votes. The Secretary of State of Georgia at that time said no. When Donald Trump called our governor, Governor Abbott, and said, hey, man, I need 5 more congressional seats, Greg Abbott said, sure,
Top Republicans now are saying the FBI should get involved in what has been a political dispute in Texas and arrest or detain Democratic lawmakers who left the state trying to fight fire with fire against a MAGA bid to twist the voting process and redistricting in a different time of the year, or the decade, I should say. The Times says it could lead to a clash between Trump and governors. The FBI has, as of yet, not gotten formally involved. About 50 Democrats have left Texas from the legislature. They are taking these measures to deny Republicans the required minimum number of people to go forward with a plan that Democrats say attacks democracy itself. And Trump, I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the hour, now we're going to play it for you. The president basically admits they need to change the rules, otherwise they could lose seats.
We have an opportunity in Texas to pick up 5 seats. We have a really good governor, and we are entitled to 5 more seats.
There it is, a naked admission that this isn't about democracy or representing the actual views of Texas, but just entitled to holding on to power. And remember, if they don't change the rules, you would just have a normal, fair election in Texas. Apparently, they think they'd lose that. We'll be right back. That does it for us. Thanks for watching The Beat. The weeknight starts now.